Time for a soccer down here 1v1, and this one's a cool one. You know the full-length documentary that came out with the 404 kit? We have part of the brain trust attached to it. We're going to get some behind-the-scenes stuff, some cool moments, a lot of stuff that went into the making of that half hour of tremendous documentarianism, if that's a word. It now is, anyway. Senior Director of Marketing for Atlanta United, Molly Paterno, hanging out with us. Molly, thanks for coming on for a 1v1.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So, all right, let me go to the end, and we'll work our way backward, and we'll kind of go in a circle. It was finally produced. It had gone through all of the different stages. It got the okay from every single check mark it needed to get okayed, and it finally came out. When you had the chance to sit down and watch it detached from all of the process, what was it like for you and the crew that put this together to watch it?
I think the first thing that comes to mind is just an incredible sense of pride. Proud to be part of this Atlanta United team that was part of the production and vision for this piece. But ultimately, I think a deeper sense of pride to be representing a city that all of us care so deeply about, to be a part of a club like Atlanta United. It's really meaningful and meaningful beyond the pitch. I think we try our best every day to represent all the values of the city. And this documentary was another chance for us to tell the story of the city that we care so deeply about.
How many people are we talking about? How long of a credit roll are we talking about here to put this together? And how long of a process was it from genesis of idea to completion? How many folks and how much time?
Oh, John, asking all the hard questions. I mean, we have an incredible depth to our team. So many different departments came together to really put this piece out in a way that we ultimately were so proud and excited about. So everyone from our creative teams, our marketing teams, our digital teams, our social teams, our communications teams. So, upwards of 50 plus people really to bring this to life. And that's not even including all of our external partners. So as I'm sure you're aware, we partnered really closely with the incredible brand here in the city. Atlanta Influences Everything. Tori, Bame, and Ian were instrumental partners in bringing this piece to life, as well as all of our talent and influential voices and cultural anthropologists that took part in this. So I guess overall you're getting, I'm not great at math, but overall upwards of, I guess, 80 people if you take all that into consideration.
When it came to the treasure hunt, and that's what this basically was, because for someone who watched it, you're sitting there going, hey, there's that person, hey, there's that person, and there's that person. What was it like to have this treasure hunt, to sit there and say, okay, we have a list of folks, we've got our wish list and our treasure hunt. What was it like piecing this puzzle together with all of these names and ideas in different directions that you could go?
Yeah, I think the gift that we have being a part of the city of Atlanta is for every different dimension of this story, there could have been, 10, 20, 30 additional voices that we brought in. It came down to a matter of timing and scheduling. As I'm sure you can imagine, some of the folks that took part in this have incredibly busy schedules. So we're very appreciative that they were able to make time in their schedule to do something like this. But ultimately, it really came down to us wanting to make sure that we could tell all of the important pieces of the story and culture that made up the story of this kit. So we started by looking at a high level, what are some of the different dimensions of culture we really felt went into the inspiration behind the design. So there was music, of course, HBCU culture, events like Freaknik, events like the 1996 Olympics, business, politics, so on and so forth. But those were kind of the main pieces of the story that we really wanted to represent. So we started thinking about who were some of the voices, who were some of the culture shapers that were really a part of this movement in the 90s, and this wave of creativity that was taking place, which ultimately is what our kit is rooted in. So we kind of started by rooting ourselves in what is the story of this kit, what are all the dimensions of the story, and then who are the best representatives of each of those dimensions, and started playing a little bit of scheduling Tetris, and ultimately we're able to get a really solid group of people to put this piece together.
When it came to piecing it together, was your, I know obviously you want to shoot for the stars in something like this. What do you think what were some of the cooler gets? When we do interviews, we're always talking about the get and the art of the get. Who were some of the cooler gets that you were sitting there thinking, okay, we're going to put it on the list and we hope we get them? When it came to the hope and the get, when you look back on this thing, what was it like to grab somebody, sit there and go, we'd love to have them. If we get them, great. And they show up and then all of a sudden they're like, yeah, I'm in. And it's like one of those kind of eureka kind of deals. What were some of those guys and folks that were part and parcel to the cool gets of this project?
I love that question. I think that answer would differ depending on what member of our team you ask this question to. So I think for me, one of the incredible gets was former Mayor Shirley Franklin. She obviously has such a strong rooted perspective on the city and so many different elements throughout the past several decades that have really shaped the city. So I even think hearing from a lot of our supporters who some of their favorite voices that were a part of the piece were, Mayor Shirley Franklin definitely stood out. But I mean, everybody that was a part of this, from Big Boy to Killer Mike, was actually the very first interview that we did. That came together very quickly. I think in the course of confirming late at night on a Sunday to making the interview come to life Monday at 9 a.m. It took a team to get that one together, but he really set the tone and has so much knowledge, of course, in the space of music, but politics, civic engagement, HBUC culture, a lot of those elements that represent the entire story. He was an incredible wealth of knowledge, and we were honored to have him as our first interview. And really, the inspiration just came from there. So TI was exciting. I think some of the new faces of youth culture were really exciting for us to get. So Earth Gang and Black, we were happy to have them as a part of the piece as well. But I could go on and name every single person that was a part of this project, but those were a few that stood out in my mind.
Molly Paterno, Senior Director of Marketing for Atlanta United, hanging out with us as we kind of peel back the curtain on the 404 doc here on Soccer Down Here for a 1v1. How much of an education was it for you putting this together?
Oh, it was an incredible education. I wasn't born in Atlanta. I didn't grow up here. I'm actually from the West Coast. My family and my husband's family is from here, so I've always felt a true sense of connection every time we come back to the city. I've felt a special place in my heart, and so happy to be here. But in terms of kind of the depth of an intricacy of story that was happening here in the 90s. I mean, not to date myself, but the 1996 Olympics were the first Olympics that I remember watching as a young girl in my bedroom on the West Coast, and seeing Michael Johnson and seeing the women's Olympic gymnastic team and the U.S. women's national team. It was so incredibly meaningful. So that moment really stood out. But to hear kind of the turning point and the exposure that the 1996 Olympics brought this city was a piece that really stands out in my mind. Along with kind of all of the intricacies of Atlanta hip hop culture and the true community that even something like, you look at the LA scene in terms of hip hop, you look at the New York scene in terms of hip hop. And the number one thing we kept hearing throughout all of these interviews is Atlanta, there's a sense of camaraderie and there's a sense of all being in it together. And I think that camaraderie and that togetherness kind of stood as a key kind of component of the story that I didn't know, not being from here, but it really feels like there is a group mentality and a specialness that Atlanta has when it comes to everybody kind of trying to help each other out. And that was a small cultural kind of nuance that came out through several of these interviews.
When it comes to the feedback that you and the staff that put this together, that credit roll that put this together, what is the feedback that you're either getting firsthand or secondhand about the presentation itself? And I know that probably some of us are sitting there going, "Where's the director's cut? Where's all the interviews that were on the cutting room floor, and where can we see those?" What's the feedback been like since this was released?
I think the number one thing we wanted to do is to truly be a platform to bring this story of the pivotal decade that really shaped the design and inspired the design of our kit. And so to hear from folks that were here in the 90s, that were a part of Freaknik or were a part of the Atlanta hip hop scene, for some of them to reach out and say, this piece is truly meaningful. It's special. I got goosebumps when I was watching it. That was the goal, to truly connect with folks that have been here, been a part of the city, and have been part of the shaping of the city. So that was really exciting for us.
Do you and the crew that put this together, the credit roll that put this together, I know that when you're doing any kind of a documentary or any kind of a long form project, there's that responsibility about getting it right and making sure that all of the steps are the right steps to take to make sure that the story is told correctly and it's presented in a way that really does convey the message that you wanted to put out there. How much thought and effort went into making sure that the message was going to be correct and that everything was going to be laid out the way that it was supposed to be, to make sure that the story was told the right way?
We spent a lot of time obsessing the authenticity of this piece. And if I think back to the original treatment or the storyline, it actually was very different. Even the way that the story was originally visioned to be five separate 5 to 7 minute pieces, highlighting specific dimensions of the culture. That was where we started, and where we ended was an almost 30-minute long form documentary piece. And I think that shift came from really wanting to make sure that we got the connectivity between these different dimensions of the culture right. I think the storyline, our fearless director kept calling it a coming of age story. And that's really what we wanted people to feel moving through these different years throughout the 90s, but even hinting at, the decades prior. So acknowledging a lot of the work that was done as a part of the civil rights movement that gave way to what was happening culturally here in the 90s. So we really wanted people to go along that journey with us. And that truly influenced the storyline. It ended up completely changing the treatment while trying to remain as authentic as possible to the narrative and as committed as possible. That's the thing that our team kept saying is, we want to get the story right, and we want to do right by the voices that are in this piece, and also want to put something out that feels truly reflective of the culture of Atlanta, of the story of Atlanta. And we want not just our internal team to be proud of this, but the entire city to be proud.
Because that is a delicate dance, because when you mentioned that the initial idea was to do it in basically chapters, and the idea of, okay, here's something that is a chapter and it's more of a fast food version. It's like 5 or 6 minutes and you do 4 separate chapters. It's a delicate dance to sit there and go, okay, no, we need to piece all of this stuff together. It needs to be a full length thing, because that way everything can be laid out. I mean, that is a tough conversation to have, especially when you're talking attention spans and storylines and all this kind of stuff. That's a tough conversation to have, I imagine.
Absolutely. And I think ultimately, we know that our fans, our supporters have busy lives. We knew that if we put it out in these separate chapters, that folks might have time to watch one, but not the other. And I think we really felt a commitment to making sure we told the story of how it wasn't just one dimension of culture. It wasn't just music. It wasn't just civic engagement. It wasn't just business. It was kind of all of these elements coming together and converging in one of the most influential and informative decades that the city has seen. So we really took that into consideration when thinking about the structure of the piece as well.
All right. So my last question for you: what do you do for an encore?
John, asking the hard hitting questions. Uh, no, we're going to continue to remain true to the city like we always have been. Really excited about some of the things we have coming up for next year. Going to be an evolution of where we have been this past year, and with every year that the club continues, we keep trying to evolve the brand, push the brand forward, invite more people into the sport, invite more people into the club, and that's what we're excited to continue doing.
Rising tide lifts all boats, no doubt about it. Back to the 90s. It is on the Atlanta United FC YouTube channel. It is there, right there, front and center, right under the fold. Molly Paterno, thanks for hanging out with us here and pulling back the curtain on the 404 doc. I loved it, and it was an engrossing watch all the way through, beginning to end. It's something that you cannot put down, especially if you grew up here. Thanks for hanging out with us for a Soccer Down Here 1v1. We'll be keeping an eye on things, and we'll catch up with you soon.
Thanks, John.